Chapter 4. Birth and Betrayal. The catacombs beneath St. Paul's Cathedral exhaled centuries of decay, a miasma that clung to the stone like a shroud. Phosphorescent fungi traced ghostly constellations along the ossuary walls, casting just enough light to transform human remains into macabre architecture. Skulls grinned from their mortared prisons, jaws locked in eternal laughter at the folly of the living who dared trespass among the dead. Lily Ravenwood moved through this labyrinth of bones with the fluid grace of shadow itself. Her footfalls made no sound against the ancient flagstones. Even the dust motes suspended in the stale air seemed reluctant to acknowledge her passage. The burns on her palms had healed to silvery scars that caught the eerie light, a testament to her communion with the storm days before. Her tattoos pulsed with a subtle amber glow, not the blinding constellation they had become during the lightning strike, but a steady, controlled luminescence that mapped her veins like buried treasure. The magic in her blood sang a different tune now, no longer Revenko's reluctant instrument but her own fierce melody. "Left at the femur arch," she whispered to herself, following directions memorized from a half-burned map she'd discovered in the abandoned quarters of one of Revenko's failed apprentices. 3 passages past the child skulls. The catacombs narrowed, the ceiling dropping until Lily was forced to crouch. The walls pressed closer, centuries of limestone weeping moisture that collected in stagnant pools. Her heightened senses, a gift from the storm's baptism, detected subtle changes in the air currents, the faintest whisper of movement ahead. From her pocket, she withdrew the brass gear stolen from Revenko's homunculus. It sat in her palm, ticking with phantom energy, as though remembering its former purpose. Against her skin, it felt warm, almost alive. A key seeking its lock. The passage widened suddenly into a circular chamber. Lily paused at the threshold, her amber-lit silhouette casting elongated shadows that danced across bone-studded walls. The chamber floor dropped away 3 feet beyond the entrance, replaced by a moat of quicksilver that encircled a central platform. The mercury's surface rippled with hypnotic patterns, reflecting the phosphorescent fungi in distorted waves. Lily's nostrils flared at the caustic fumes rising from the liquid metal. Alchemical fire, blue and unnaturally still, burned in sconces around the chamber, their flames neither flickering nor consuming their fuel. The heat they generated was minimal, serving more as warning than warmth. She crouched at the edge of the mercury moat, studying its circumference with narrowed eyes. The stolen gear vibrated more insistently in her palm, responding to something in the chamber. Across the quicksilver barrier, carved into the central platform's stone, she could make out a circular depression, a keyhole for her mechanical prize. "Predictable," Lily murmured at the moat, her voice barely disturbing the oppressive silence. Revenko's defenses always followed the same principles: elegant, deadly, and fundamentally flawed by his own arrogance. He relied too heavily on the fear his traps inspired, never considering that someone might value discovery more than safety. The mercury would dissolve flesh on contact. The fumes would corrode lungs, but there was always a path if one knew how to look. Her gaze traced the ceiling, noting the stalactites that hung like stone daggers above the moat. Each one aligned with a specific point in the mercury below, creating a pattern only visible from her angle at the entrance. A path hidden in plain sight. Lily slipped the gear back into her pocket and reached for the clay finger she had twisted from her golem. Another trophy of defiance. The clay had hardened further since that night by the Thames, taking on the consistency of stone while retaining the faintest pulse of her blood magic. She was close now. She could feel it in the weight of the darkness, in the way the silence pressed against her eardrums like a physical force. This chamber guarded the heart of Revenko's power, the secrets he had killed to protect, the knowledge that bound her brother's fate to her own. The tattoos along her arms brightened as she channeled her intent through them, preparing to navigate the deadly moat. The storm had awakened something primal in her magic, something Revenko's brand could not contain. She was no longer merely his instrument. With a practiced flick of her wrist, Lilly withdrew a small leather pouch from her bodice. The powder within a mixture of crushed chalk, bone ash, and salt harvested during the new moon. Spilled from her fingers in a controlled stream. It hissed against the quicksilver moat, each granule sizzling like raindrops on hot iron. The mercury's surface dimpled, then stilled, a thin white crust forming where the alchemical reaction neutralized its caustic properties. Predictable indeed, she murmured, satisfaction curling her lips as she traced a path across the now dormant metal with her toe. The chamber's blue flames cast elongated shadows as Lilly stepped onto the hardened mercury, testing its stability before committing her full weight. It held firm, the powder's magic transforming liquid death into a crystalline bridge. 3 careful steps brought her to the central platform, where the circular depression awaited its mechanical key. A soft whirring sound broke the sepulchral silence. Lilly froze, her body instinctively dropping into a defensive crouch. From an alcove she hadn't noticed, a clever trick of shadow and stone, emerged a figure that straddled the boundary between man and machine. The clockwork sentry moved with jerky precision, its brass skeleton housing gears that clicked and whirred with each step. Human bones formed its core structure. Femurs for legs. A ribcage housing delicate clockwork, finger bones articulated with copper wire. Most disturbing were its eyes. Perfect glass spheres that caught the blue light, revealing swirling mist within. Not empty glass, but vessels containing something that moved with purpose, with awareness. "Hello, brother," Lilly whispered, her voice barely disturbing the stale air. The sentry's head rotated toward her with mechanical deliberation. Its jaw, fashioned from a human mandible, opened and closed without sound. The glass eyes fixed upon her with an intensity that transcended their mechanical nature. Lilly's tattoos pulsed in response, recognizing a kindred imprisonment. The souls trapped within those glass orbs were bound by magic, not unlike Revenko's brand on her cheek. Servants transformed into tools, and will be subsumed by another's purpose. The sentry lurched forward, bone fingers extending toward her throat. Lilly sidestepped, fluid as water, her hand already reaching for the brass gear in her pocket. It thrummed against her palm, vibrating more intensely as it neared its mechanical kin. "You're not so different from me," she told the construct as she circled it, noting the access panel on its back where gears and springs were visible through a lattice of brass. A prison of flesh and metal, bound by another's will. The sentry pivoted, faster than its awkward movements suggested possible. One bone hand caught Lilly's sleeve, tearing the fabric as she twisted away. Its glass eyes tracked her with unnerving focus, the mist within them swirling more frantically. Lilly feinted left, then dropped and rolled right, coming up behind the construct. Before it could turn, she pressed the stolen gear against an empty socket in its back. The gear slotted into place with a satisfying click, then began to rotate, meshing with the sentry's internal mechanisms. The effect was immediate. The construct's movements slowed, its limbs jerking spasmodically as the foreign component disrupted its clockwork heart. The whirring inside its chest cavity grew erratic, gears grinding against each other in mechanical protest. Lilly caught the sentry as it began to collapse, easing its weight to the stone floor with surprising gentleness. The brass was warm beneath her fingers, almost feverish, as though the metal itself were alive. "Sleep well, sweet martyr," she murmured, cradling the construct's head as the light in its glass eyes began to dim. The sentry's jaw worked silently, opening and closing in what might have been an attempt at speech. The mist within its eyes swirled slower now, condensing into patterns that reminded Lilly of written script or runes, messages she couldn't quite decipher. With careful fingers, she traced the metal socket holding the right eye in place. A simple mechanism, elegant in its cruelty. She pressed at the release catch, feeling it give way beneath her touch. The eye came free with a wet pop that echoed in the chamber. Fluid the color of tarnished silver leaked from the empty socket, smelling of ozone and old coagulated blood. In her palm, the glass orb pulsed with fading light. The soul, smoke within it, curling against the transparent surface like a prisoner pressing against cell bars. Lilly held the eye up to her own, peering through it at the chamber. The world transformed through its lens. Hidden sigils blazed on the walls. Arcane connections between the chamber's elements revealed themselves as threads of light. Revenko's secrets laid bare through the perspective of his own creation. "I'll put you to better use," she promised the eye, her voice soft with an emotion she rarely allowed herself. Compassion, perhaps, or recognition. The sentry's remaining eye dimmed to blackness, its mechanical heart giving one final stuttering click before falling silent. Lilly slipped the glass orb into her pocket alongside the clay finger, another trophy of defiance, another tool reclaimed from her captor's arsenal. She turned toward the circular depression in the platform's center, her path now clear. The chamber's secrets awaited, and with them, perhaps, her brother's fate. The circular chamber opened before Lilly like the maw of some ancient beast, its curved walls lined with shelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. The vault door groaned shut behind her, its ancient hinges protesting with a sound like distant thunder rolling across the Thames. Blood still glistened on her fingertips where she'd pressed them against the lock, her own essence, the key that Revenko had unwittingly provided. Moonlight spilled through a single aperture in the domed ceiling, a shaft of silver that illuminated the center of the room while leaving the edges in shadow. The beam caught motes of dust that danced like diminutive spirits, casting an ethereal glow across Revenko's collection. Lilly's breath caught in her throat. The shelves held hundreds of glass containers, each housing some manner of preserved oddity. Eyes of every color and size floated in viscous fluid. Fingers, some human and others decidedly not, curled like pale sea anemones in cloudy brine. Organs suspended in solutions that shifted and swirled with unnatural purpose. "Mother of Night," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the sepulchral silence. The glass orb in her pocket, the sentry's eye, grew warm against her thigh, responding to the arcane energies that permeated the chamber. Lilly withdrew it, holding it up to see. Through its lens, the room transformed. Labels written in invisible ink blazed forth on each container, naming their contents and origins in Revenko's precise hand. She moved deeper into the vault, drawn by the moonbeam's spotlight to a pedestal at the chamber's heart. Upon it sat a jar unlike the others, crafted of crystal rather than common glass, its surface etched with sigils that writhed and shifted when viewed through the sentry's eye. Inside, suspended in luminescent fluid that glowed with an otherworldly blue-green light, floated what appeared to be a withered rope, no thicker than her little finger. It twisted slowly in the ether, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beat of Lilly's own heart. The label, visible only through the sentry's eye, read, "Ravenwood, Lillian, umbilical, harvested 1751. Lilly's knees nearly buckled. Her free hand flew to her stomach, fingers splaying across the skin where once, long ago, this cord had connected her to her mother. The violation struck her with physical force, driving the air from her lungs. My umbilical cord," she breathed, the words tasting of ash and bile. "He's had it all along." The jar's curved surface reflected her face, distorting her features into something barely recognizable. Wide eyes, hollow cheeks, parted lips. The blue-green glow painted her skin with corpse light, transforming her into something neither living nor dead. Within the amniotic ether, the cord pulsed again, more strongly this time, as though recognizing its former owner. The fluid began to swirl, creating miniature whirlpools that caught the moonlight and scattered it in prismatic shards across the walls. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible as a winter sunrise. This was how Revenko controlled her. Not just through the brand on her cheek, but through this primal connection. The first magic she had ever known, the link between mother and child, life and sustenance. He had taken the most intimate part of her, and turned it into a tether, a leash, a chain. Lily's reflection in the jar shifted, momentarily replaced by her mother's face. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, lips curved in a song Lily could almost remember. Then it was gone, leaving only her own haunted expression. Her fingers moved of their own accord, reaching for the jar. The glass was neither warm nor cold, existing in some impossible middle state that sent shivers racing along her spine. The moment her skin made contact with the crystal, the cord within convulsed violently, the ether churning into a frenzy. The vault around her dissolved like fog before the morning sun. Lily felt herself falling, tumbling through darkness, the jar still clutched in her hands. Colors exploded behind her eyes. Crimson, violet, gold. As a vision seized her consciousness with teeth of fire and claws of ice. The vision seized her with the force of a winter gale, stripping away the present until Lily found herself hovering above a stone altar, a spectral witness to her own beginning. Moonlight from a blood moon, crimson as freshly spilled blood, poured through a circular aperture in the ceiling, bathing the chamber in unholy radiance. Torches guttered in iron sconces, their flames dancing to the rhythm of a woman's agonized screams. The air hung thick with the scent of burning herbs, copper, and the unmistakable tang of birth. Upon the altar lay a woman, her raven hair plastered to her sweat-slicked face, her body arched in the throes of labor. Despite her exhaustion, her features struck Lily with the force of recognition. The same high cheekbones, the same determined set of jaw. Mother. Push! Revenko's voice, younger but no less commanding, sliced through the woman's cries. He stood at the foot of the altar acting the guide. Sleeves rolled to his elbows, hands stained crimson to the wrists. The child must be born under the blood moon. Hooded figures surrounded the altar, their faces obscured by shadow, their hands working in practiced unison as they prepared ceremonial vessels and muttered incantations in a language that seemed to scrape against the very air. I can't! The woman's protest dissolved into another scream as her body convulsed and she tried to push. You will, Revenko hissed, his eyes reflecting the torchlight like twin pools of oil. The Blackwood line ends and begins anew tonight. Lily watched, transfixed with horror and fascination, as her mother gave one final, desperate push. The chamber filled with a new sound. The indignant wail of a newborn thrust into the cold world of winter and ritual. A girl, Revenko announced, lifting the squalling infant. His expression shifted from determination to calculation, as though reassessing the value of a disappointing investment. Not what I anticipated, but she carries the bloodline nonetheless. The infant, Lily herself, continued to cry, tiny fists flailing against the chill air. The umbilical cord, still connecting mother and child, pulsed with each beat of their shared hearts. Cut the cord, Revenko ordered one of the hooded assistants. Preserve it immediately. An assistant stepped forward with a silver knife, its edge gleaming in the torchlight. The blade severed the connection with a single stroke, and the cord was gathered into an ornate crystal vessel, the same one Lily had discovered in Revenko's vault. No, her mother protested weakly, reaching toward the infant. Let me hold her. Revenko hesitated, then placed the child in her warm, yearning arms with obvious reluctance. The woman cradled the infant against her breast, her fingers trembling as they traced the newborn's features. Her eyes, though glazed with exhaustion, burned with fierce determination. Liliana, she whispered, her lips brushing the infant's forehead. Remember who you are. The storm runs in your blood. Lily felt the words resonate through her very bones, awakening memories long buried beneath years of Revenko's conditioning. The storm. The lightning. Her mother's face illuminated by flashes of celestial fire as she taught her daughter to harness the sky's power. Enough, Revenko snapped, reaching for the child. The moon's zenith approaches. You'll not have her soul, her mother snarled, suddenly alert despite her weakened state. I've woven my protection into her name, into her very skin, tattoos that will grow with her power. Revenko's face contorted with rage. You dare? The vision shifted, fragments of time collapsing and reforming. Lilly glimpsed her mother, days later, slipping through shadows with an infant bundled against her chest. The woman's face was gaunt but determined, her steps unsteady yet purposeful as she fled into a snow-swept night. Years compressed into moments. A cottage by the sea. Her mother's hands, gentle but firm, guided Lilly's small fingers to trace patterns in copper wire during a thunderstorm. The same hands braiding her hair, weaving protective symbols into each plait. Then came the ship, pitching on a tempestuous sea. Lightning split the sky as waves crashed over the deck. Her mother's face, illuminated in staccato bursts of brilliance, shouting words lost to the howling wind, the crack of splintering wood, the cold embrace of the ocean, two other faces. Her father and her brother, and through it all, Revenko's patient, predatory pursuit, always one step behind until that fateful storm outside Marseille, when he finally reclaimed what he believed was rightfully his. Understanding crashed through Lilly like the waves that had claimed her mother, the brand on her neck and limbs, the tattoos, and Revenko's obsession. It wasn't a claiming. It was a reclaiming of what he felt was his from the moment of her birth. Her mother had saved her only to lose her to the sea, and then to Revenko's machinations years later. Tears streamed down Lilly's face as the vision began to dissolve, the stone altar and blood moon fading like mist before the morning sun. The crystal jar remained clutched in her hands, the umbilical cord within, still pulsing with unnatural life. The first chain in a lifetime of bondage. "Mother," she whispered, the word tasting of salt and sorrow. "I remember now. I remember who I am." The crystal jar grew cold in Lilly's hands as the vision released her, reality snapping back like a bowstring. The umbilical cord within pulsed once, twice, then began to shrivel up, its fibers unraveling like thread pulled from ancient cloth. The blue-green light dimmed, flickering as though struggling against an inevitable tide. "Dying, transferring its life to me," she whispered, watching the physical manifestation of Revenko's control crumble. "Just as his hold on me is—" The chamber's silence pressed against her ears. Lilly set the jar on the pedestal, her fingertips lingering on the glass. The reflection no longer showed her mother's face, only her own, hardened by years of servitude and newfound resolve. Her gaze swept the vault's curved walls, cataloguing its contents with predatory focus. Beyond the macabre collection of preserved oddities lay a mahogany cabinet, its brass fittings gleaming despite the chamber's dim light. Unlike the other displays, this one bore no visible lock, a curious oversight for a man as paranoid as Revenko. The cabinet yielded to her touch, swinging open on silent hinges. Inside rested a leather-bound ledger, its spine cracked from frequent use. A single raven's feather marked a page, the quill's edge stained with what might have been ink. Lilly extracted the book, balancing its weight in her palms. The feather slipped, revealing a page of names written in Revenko's spidery hand. 3 entries caught her eye, circled in red. William Blackwood, Jackson Westwood, Olivia Hawthorne. Her brother's name she expected. Revenko's obsession with the Blackwood bloodline ran deep. But the others? Westwood. A memory, Revenko speaking to a hooded figure about a man who knew too much, about the old ways, a potential threat to be eliminated. Lilly slipped the ledger into her bodice for further study, its leather cool against her skin. The cord in the jar had nearly dissolved now, its substance reduced to dust that swirled in the remaining light. As the final fibers disintegrated, the brand on Lilly's cheek flared with sudden heat, then cooled to nothing more than a scar. A raven mark on her skin. Symbolic, she murmured, touching the mark, but effective. The distant toll of cathedral bells penetrated even these depths. Midnight approaching. Revenko would soon discover her absence, if he hadn't already. The clockwork sentries would be searching, their glass eyes scanning every shadow. Lilly moved with fluid purpose, retracing her steps across the Mercury Bridge. The substance had begun to liquefy again, rippling beneath her feet as though eager to claim her. She quickened her pace, the ledger a reassuring weight against her chest. The catacombs welcomed her with their embrace, but where once they had seemed a maze designed to trap, now they offered concealment, protection. The glass eye guided her, its pulse strengthening when she chose the correct path, fading when she strayed. Cold fury crystallized in her veins, transforming from chaotic rage to something more dangerous, a plan taking shape with each step. The names in the ledger weren't merely targets. They were pieces on a board she was only beginning to understand. Allies, perhaps. Or enemies to be turned. A draft of night air caressed her face as she ascended a narrow stairwell, emerging into a forgotten corner of the cathedral grounds. Fog rolled across the churchyard, shrouding the headstones in ghostly veils. The final bell tolled, its resonance fading into the fabric of the city. Lilly melted into the mist, her path no longer dictated by Revenko's commands, but illuminated by her own purpose. The hunt had begun, but this time, she was the predator. The moonlight sliced through London's perpetual haze, casting the city in silver and shadow. Lilly crouched on the edge of a rooftop opposite St. Paul's Cathedral, her silhouette a darker patch against the night sky. The dome loomed before her, its weathered stone drinking in the waning moon's glow, while the eastern transept remained in partial darkness, save for the stained glass angel that caught occasional glints of light. Lilly's fingers traced the outline of a throwing star nestled in her palm. The metal had warmed to her touch, its edges whispering promises of precision and destruction. She'd chosen this particular star for its weight, its balance, the way it sang through the air when released properly. Perfect, she murmured, testing the wind with a dampened fingertip. The night air carried the scent of coal smoke and river mist, thick enough to taste, but not enough to disrupt her aim. The ledger's weight pressed against her ribs where she'd secured it beneath her bodice. Those three names had become a mantra in her mind: William Blackwood, Jackson Westwood, Olivia Hawthorne. Pieces on a board she was only beginning to understand. But first, she needed to create a diversion. Something to occupy Revenko while she hunted. Her gaze fixed on Nelson's column, calculating angles and trajectories with mathematical precision. The distance, the wind resistance, the exact point of impact needed. All these variables flowed through her mind like quicksilver, settling into certainty. Lilly rose to her full height, balancing on the edge of the roof with feline grace. She drew her arm back, muscles coiling like springs beneath her skin. "Time for your fall from grace," she whispered to the distant angel, its painted face serene and unknowing. The star left her fingers with a whisper of displaced air. It spun through the night, a deadly silver disk catching moonlight as it arced toward Nelson's column. The impact against stone produced a spark, brief as a firefly's life, before the star ricocheted at precisely the angle she'd calculated. The second flight was faster, more direct. The star struck the stained glass angel at its center, the impact sending a spiderweb of cracks racing outward. For one suspended moment, the angel remained intact, fractures transforming its benevolent expression into something shattered and malevolent. Then came the cascade. Glass fragments rained down, a musical destruction that echoed across the sleeping city. Each shard caught the moonlight, transforming the fall into a glittering waterfall of color and light. Lilly watched, cold satisfaction spreading through her chest as the pieces arranged themselves in their descent, guided by the invisible hand of probability and her precise calculation. The shards settled on the cathedral steps, and Lilly's breath caught in her throat. There it was, the unmistakable sigil of the Blackthorn Coven, Revenko's most bitter rivals. The curved horns, the central eye, the three slashing marks that represented their founding members, all perfectly formed from broken angel glass. The brand on her cheek had cooled to nothing more than a scar. But Lilly felt a different heat now, the burn of vengeance, of plans set in motion. Let Revenko waste his resources hunting phantoms while she pursued her true quarry. The glass eye in her pouch pulsed once, as though in approval. Lilly melted back from the roof's edge, a shadow among shadows. The first move in her game had been played. The Blackthorn Coven would be blamed, Revenko would be distracted, and she would be hunting. The names from the ledger echoed in her mind as she descended into London's hidden backstreets. William Blackwood, Jackson Westwood, Olivia Hawthorne, her brother and two strangers, connected by some thread she had yet to unravel. Behind her, the broken angel continued to bleed colored glass onto the cathedral steps, its halo now a crown of jagged edges catching the waning moonlight. The cathedral bells had barely ceased their tolling when the first alarm shrieked to life. Lilly froze, her body instinctively flattening against the slate tiles of the roof. Searchlights erupted from St. Paul's dome, great mechanical eyes sweeping the darkness with unforgiving precision. Steam hissed from pressure valves as the cathedral's defensive systems awakened, ancient stones suddenly alive with modern menace. "Damn," Lilly muttered, the word lost beneath the wail of sirens. The diversion had worked too well. She slithered backward, the rough tiles scraping her palms as the nearest searchlight carved through fog mere inches from her position. And now, an entire city's worth of clockwork sentries between her and freedom. The beam swept closer, illuminating particles of dust and fog in its harsh glare. Lilly calculated angles, distances, and the likelihood of being spotted if she moved now, versus 30 seconds from now. Mathematics of survival, equations written in sweat and fear. A chimney stack offered momentary shelter. Lilly pressed her back against the warm brick, feeling the residual heat of fires extinguished. Below, the narrow streets of London spread like a maze of shadow, pinpricked by gaslight. Her gaze fixed on a particular alleyway, where a coal chute gaped like a toothless mouth. The searchlight pivoted, its mechanical arm grinding as it swept toward her position. No time for elegance. Lilly launched herself from the rooftop, her body arcing through the night air with practiced grace. The fall lasted 3 heartbeats. One to prepare, one to position, one to brace. She hit the adjacent roof in a controlled roll, momentum carrying her toward the edge. Without pausing, she slid over the rain gutter and dropped to a lower ledge, then to a windowsill, then at last, to the cobblestones below. The impact jarred her ankles, but she compensated and remained upright, already moving, sprinting toward the coal chute. The metal cover yielded to her hands, hinges protesting with a screech that set her teeth on edge. Lilly slipped inside feet first, pulling the cover closed after her. Darkness swallowed her whole. The chute's metal surface scraped against her back as she descended, the smell of coal dust filling her lungs. Her descent accelerated beyond control, body bumping against the sides of the narrow passage. Something sharp caught her sleeve, tearing fabric and skin alike. Lilly bit back a curse, focusing instead on slowing her fall by pressing her palms and feet against the sides of the chute. She emerged in a heap at the bottom, coal dust billowing around her like black fog. The cellar was mercifully empty except for the heap of coal she landed in. The cellar's darkness was absolute, save for thin slivers of moonlight penetrating through a grate near the ceiling. Lilly oriented herself, listening for pursuit above. The alarms continued their frantic wailing, but no footsteps followed her path. A narrow door led from the cellar into what appeared to be a service corridor. Lilly moved silently, her steps measured and precise. The corridor opened into an alley, and the stench hit her like a physical blow. Blood. Old and new, layered upon itself in a symphony of decay. Offal and entrails left to rot in the summer heat. The butcher's alley, where the city's meat markets disposed of their less marketable parts, perfect for disappearing. Few would willingly enter such a place after dark. Lilly had taken 3 steps into the alley when she heard it, the soft hiss of steam escaping valves, the click of metal paws against stone. She turned slowly, hand already reaching for her dagger. The bloodhound automaton stood at the mouth of the alley, its brass and bone-white body gleaming dully in the moonlight. Red glass eyes fixed upon her with unnatural focus, steam leaking from joints in its mechanical skull. Its muzzle, fashioned from polished brass, opened to reveal rows of serrated metal teeth. "Clever boy," Lilly murmured, shifting her weight to the balls of her feet. "Revenko's getting desperate, sending his pets after me." The automaton's head tilted, processing her voice, comparing it to stored samples. Recognition flashed in those crimson eyes, and it lunged. Lilly sidestepped, but the narrow alley offered little room to maneuver. Metal teeth snagged her sleeve, tearing through to the skin beneath. Pain flared, hot and immediate. The automaton's momentum carried it past her, claws scrabbling for purchase on the slick cobblestones. Blood trickled down her arm, warm against her chilled skin. The automaton turned, its movements fluid despite its mechanical nature. Steam vented from its nostrils as it processed her scent, tracking the fresh blood now mingling with the alley's miasma. It charged again, more cautious this time. Lilly feinted left, then dropped to her knees as the automaton leapt. Her dagger flashed upward, slicing through the delicate mesh of its olfactory senses. Sparks erupted from the wound, illuminating the alley in brief electric bursts. The bloodhound stumbled, its head jerking in confused movements as sensory data became corrupted. Lilly pressed her advantage, driving her dagger into the joint where neck met shoulder. More sparks, accompanied by the screech of metal against metal. The automaton's legs buckled, but its jaws snapped at her retreating hand, catching her wrist. Pain lanced up her arm as those metal teeth penetrated her skin. Lilly twisted, using the automaton's grip against it, forcing its head at an unnatural angle until something inside its neck snapped with a sound like breaking glass. The red eyes flickered, dimmed, then darkened completely. Steam escaped in a final sigh as the mechanical beast collapsed, its jaws relaxing enough for Lilly to extract her bleeding wrist. "Sorry, pup," she said, wiping her dagger clean on her torn sleeve. "Wrong bitch to hunt." The automaton lay still, a heap of brass and organics in a pool of offal. Lilly knelt beside it, examining the craftsmanship with professional appreciation. Revenko's work was always exquisite, even in its malice. Her fingers traced the seam where the automaton's head joined its body, finding the small access panel hidden beneath an ornamental collar. Inside the access panel, Lilly found a small brass cylinder etched with Revenko's maker's mark. She pocketed it, wiping blood from her fingers onto her torn sleeve. "You'll tell me your secrets later," she murmured to the cylinder, tucking it securely into an inner pocket. The alley's stench intensified as a warm breeze stirred the rotting offal. Lilly's gaze swept the narrow passage, calculating. The automaton lay sprawled in a grotesque parody of death, its limbs akimbo, red glass eyes dark and lifeless. Oil leaked from its severed neck joint, forming a slick black pool that mingled with the alley's filth. Lilly reached into her boot, fingers closing around the clay finger she'd twisted from her golem at the river's edge. The piece had hardened, its surface rough against her skin, the Hebrew characters still faintly visible despite the Thames water that had partially eroded them. The finger retained a whisper of power, a memory of the souls it had once contained. She turned it over in her palm, tracing the Ashkenazi markings with her thumb. The clay felt warm, almost alive. "Perfect," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of London's midnight hour. With deliberate care, Lilly placed the clay finger beside the automaton's outstretched paw. She arranged it to appear as though it had been torn from the mechanical beast's quarry, evidence of a struggle between opposing forces. The contrast was striking. Revenko's gleaming brass technology beside the ancient earth magic of the Ashkenazi coven. Oil from the automaton's ruptured hydraulics seeped toward the clay, touching its edge with glistening darkness. The finger seemed to absorb the oil, the Hebrew characters darkening as if drinking in the mechanical beast's lifeblood. Lilly glanced upward. A window 3 stories above had shattered during her struggle with the automaton, its jagged edges forming an inadvertent sigil against the night sky, the broken glass resembling the mark of the Blackthorn Coven. Another piece in her elaborate deception. The cathedral bells began to toll midnight, their sonorous voices rolling across the city like waves of bronze. 12 strikes to mark the witching hour. Lilly counted each one, her lips curving into a smile that never reached her eyes. "Let's watch the dogs fight," she whispered to the night, satisfaction threading through her voice. The stage was set. Revenko would find his broken pet and the evidence of Ashkenazi interference. The warlocks would discover their missing golems and suspect Revenko's mechanical hunters. Ancient grudges would flare, accusations would fly, and in the ensuing chaos, Lilly Ravenwood would move unseen toward her true purpose. She melted into the shadows at the alley's edge, leaving behind her carefully crafted scene. London spread before her like a vast chessboard, its streets and alleys the squares upon which her gambit would play out. The pieces were in motion now. Pawns and knights, bishops and rooks, all moving according to her design. The final bell tone faded into silence as Lilly disappeared into the sleeping city, her footsteps leaving no trace in the midnight gloom.